On. Welcome back to the Weekend Ball podcast. We've been on a bit of a hiatus with Canada basketball, obviously, in the FIBA World Cup ending a couple months ago. But we are very, very lucky to be joined by the CEO of Canada basketball and someone I admire very deeply, Mike Bartlett. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming on. How are you?
Alex, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thanks for having me. And honestly, thanks for making the trek out to Indonesia too. I know that was a passion project for you, and hopefully we gave you some good memories while you were there too.
Yeah, no, I definitely did, and thankfully for both of us, Canada won and made the
Yes.
Olympics, and obviously got the bronze medal in Manila. But I just want to ask you, like, what was it like for you? I know, you definitely felt the emotions of and the swings in the games. Just what was it like to see the team in Jakarta make the Olympics and then actually, get a medal and beat the U.S.?
Well, it was a wide range of emotions, personally and professionally. I think you stress through a lot of it, and that is both as a fan, but also as somebody involved in the organization. Like we had very clear expectations for ourselves. Qualifying for the Olympics was an absolute must. And then you find yourself 12 points down to Spain in the fourth quarter of what is a do or die game towards that objective. And the fan kicks in, the emotions of, just feeling so anxious and feeling every shot and every possession with great weight. It was the most emotional sporting experience that I've ever been a part of
Mm.
through that entire tournament. I've been lucky as a fan and as a consumer of sport to be at some amazing events. As a fan and as somebody who just purchased a ticket, I was at, the 2010 Olympic gold medal hockey game.
Mm-hmm.
And this was nothing like that. This was another level of emotion for me, because it is personal at this stage,
Mm-hmm.
being so connected to the organizations and the ambitions of everybody that are a part of it, knowing the athletes, knowing, the staff, the coaches, what everybody went through to punch that Olympic ticket, and knowing that it wasn't a one game. I know we position it as a one game win and in, but it was 3 years of games, 3 years of practices, 3 years of effort, and a whole bunch of people that weren't there on the ground with us in Indonesia
Yeah.
that made that fourth quarter possible. And the comeback is historic. The Olympic um, qualification is expected, but also to a degree historic. And then just set us on like a really good path towards the medal round that played out in Manila, and then we made history there too. So a truly fulfilling, up and down roller coaster of a ride, but that's sports, and that's what I signed up for. That's what I love about it.
And with you and your job, like what impact does Canada making the Olympics have for, Canada basketball, the organization? I know we've, talked about it and, marketing, money in, money out, all that stuff. Like just what does it mean for the organization?
Yeah, I think for the org, it allows us to plan. It allows us to speak to the funding ecosystem, corporate partners, government partners with utmost confidence. It's a reality. We know we're going. The ticket is ours. When I think back to, the planning cycle, even for the World Cup, we knew in November that we were going to the World Cup, so we could start lining up friendlies. We could start lining up training camp locations, flights, and all of that. Listen, the longer you wait to book all that stuff, the more expensive it is. So we've got the benefit of time now on our side where we can make some of those plans and get ahead of the cost escalation.
Hmm.
But then ultimately, to brand partners, like we've been very fortunate to have a lot of brands invest in our ambition of where we thought we should go, what our expectations were. But now that we know on the men's program, we're going there where the women have been for the last number of quads. We have confidence, of course, in the women qualifying eventually in February once that process plays itself out. We can now, with confidence, turn to brands and they can be confident in return.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so the ability to have that conversation with reality, not just ambition and expectation, it's allowing us certainly to get ahead of some of the commercial conversations and even the planning conversations that we have. I, if we had punched our ticket in Victoria to go to Tokyo, yes, there were plans that were ready to go, but commercially, we wouldn't have been able to leverage the fact that we knew we were Olympic bound.
Hmm.
Now we can, and whether like it sounds crass or not, the reality is our ability to win does come down to our ability to fund that winning. And what I'd really like to do is be able to fund a life cycle of winning and let the momentum of what's happening in our senior teams right now fuel what can happen for generations to come in our age group teams, and really start to invest really heavily into the pipeline of basketball in this country, not just at the senior level.
What kind of what like with that, money coming in, what specifics do you want to streamline to maybe, youth levels, and how does that kind of go down the chain in terms of money in from sponsorship and through the success of both the men's, women's, and 3x3 teams as well?
Yeah. So what some of the Europeans federations do very well that I think becomes a bit of a guidebook for us now with the senior success that we have, men's, women's, 3x3 as well. What does the age group and pipeline investment strategy need to look like to sustain winning over a prolonged period of time? Spain, France, United States, they've been in the top 3, 4, 5 ranked countries at all age groups for decades. So what are they doing right? With the extra resources they have financially, they invest in coaching development that creates better talent and skill capacity at all levels of the organization, down to the academy cadet level at U14. How are we developing coaches that even aren't in our system yet, that are Canadian coaches with high capacity, high interest, so that whether or not they end up in our system as a coach, we know that better coaches in the ecosystem will create better players in the ecosystem, which might propel more players into our system. So it's a chicken and egg
Yeah.
opportunity, investment in coaching. And then also from an age group perspective, I think you're starting to see RJ Barrett, for example. He was a young boy in a U14 junior academy that was created 7, 8 years ago that is now on our senior team. Shay's an example of that, others as well. So how do we expand the junior academy? Right now it's centralized and operates kind of once a month out of Ontario, men's and women's, or boys and
Mm-hmm.
girls in that age group. How are we now mobilizing that perhaps across the country with some increased funding so that BC, Montreal, other nodes pop up, and on weekends the talent in those regions can descend into a Canada basketball directed environment and learn a style of play that is Canada's style of play, learn, principles of foundational basketball that will help propel them eventually to an age group team, perhaps eventually to a global jam team, and maybe to a senior team. But at the very least, it propels them to be more talented when they have a chance to go somewhere else and play globally, NCAA or over in Europe at some point as a pro. So these are all ambitions that money will unlock.
Yeah, and what's interesting, you guys have done something. I mean, I doubt this has ever been happened before, but you guys have partnered, for a long time with the Raptors, and maybe describe that, but also just this came out a couple days ago that you have a sponsorship in place with logos on the women's team. Like that's just talk about that, because that's a pretty cool relationship in and of itself, and also just having logos on international jerseys for an NBA team is pretty cool too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool for everybody, including, our women's team that are pretty jazzed about it too. I think the story we haven't told well is that from day one of the Raptors, back to when John Bitove was awarded the team, they've been supporters of Canada basketball as a franchise. It started very much around, the hosting John Bitove and the operating group that eventually became the Raptors ownership group of the 1994 World Championships, FIBA World
Yeah.
Championships. There was a direct Canadian basketball impact for that, and it's continued. I worked at the Raptors for a decade, and one of my portfolios was the Canada basketball relationship. So I know firsthand all the time, money, and energy that has come from MLSC and the Raptors to support the ambitions of Canada basketball. And for the longest time, I'll say that support was really foundational. It was at a time when commercially the organization didn't have the reach that it has now. And the Raptors were that one unmistakable constant for Canada
Mm-hmm.
basketball. When I think back shortly after I started at Canada basketball, we're convening the women's Olympic camp, and there was no place for them to train in Canada because of the pandemic protocols. What did the Raptors do? They put up their hand and said, come on down to Tampa and use for free the facility that we spent millions of dollars to create as a temporary spot for us. That partnership has unlocked opportunities for our organization in ways that the public probably should know more about, and it'll probably take decades to tell all the stories. Putting the Raptor mark and logo on the women's shorts is honestly a way for Canada Basketball to say thank you. The Raptors for financially, in kind, operationally, strategically supporting the ways of Canada Basketball for, upwards of 3 decades now. It's also a way for us to signify, and I know there's a lot of talk about, WNBA in Canada, so on and so forth. I got a question yesterday from somebody in the media, about, if they're, do you wish that they had supported a WNBA franchise? Well, that's not my place to say. What I will say is they're supporting a WNBA team, and all of those WNBA athletes have Canada across their chest.
Yeah.
At the announcement yesterday, there were 6 WNBA athletes behind me who play for Canada. So yes, the Raptors are supporting the WNBA and the efforts of growing the girls and women's game in this country. And they're doing it at every level of our development. They're not just picking the pro opportunity. They're doing the amateur opportunity. They're doing the senior team opportunity, and all the way down to our grassroots with the creation of the Mad Love campaign, which plays out in the way that we're teaching in the academy that we have now started, also thanks in part to their support. So I got a lot of time and energy. Obviously, I've spent 10 years with the organization as well, but I wish Canada do more, and I wish we had more opportunity to tell the story of what the Raptors have really meant to Canada basketball, because without them, the success today is impossible.
And I want to go to just the team on the court, and obviously, the Raptors were involved. You had Nick Nurse at the helm for a long time, and now obviously Jordi Fernandez. Maybe just talk about a little bit about that whole process of going from Nick to Jordi, and also just what are the expectations? Like, is Jordi going to be the coach in 2024 at the Olympics?
Yeah, certainly. Well, you don't draw it up this way. You don't 8 weeks before your training camp pivot your head coaching appointment. But again, you think about the impact that Nick has had. We don't achieve what we've achieved without Nick. And, since 2019, the principles and the fundamentals that he put in place within the culture of the program as well, having these athletes, 16 to 18 athletes commit 3 summers in a row to be part of something. And then actually, if you look at the commitment we had from the Winter Corps as well, the scrubs never missed a shift. Cassius, there were so many, Trey Bell-Haynes, Melvin, who played winter and summer for components of the time too. So Nick was really the instigator of that core commitment and that strategy, and we owe him a large debt of gratitude for that. And then he was very open and involved with us, Rowan specifically, myself to a degree, as he was transitioning from the Raps into the Philly, ecosystem, of being honest with us to say, listen, I just don't think it's going to work for me to be able to commit the time to this program this summer. We understand it. And we were able to get ahead of it and actually miraculously, to a degree, keep it somewhat quiet while we could work in the background to figure out what should happen next. And Jordi had already been on our program's radar as somebody with FIBA experience, come through the Spanish system, knew the NBA guys well. And I think there at times had been talk of just adding him to the coaching staff in general. But then as the transition was becoming more and more apparent, and the need to transition with Nick was becoming more and more apparent, Nick and Rowan were talking to Jordi a bit more about what this could look like to bring him in as a head coach. And while we had some other candidates we were thinking about, Jordi was certainly at the top of the list, and it went as smoothly as you can hope for in a what could have been a turbulent situation to begin with. We were able to get that done and announced all in kind of one package, Nick transitioning out, Jordi transitioning in, communicate with the athletes before the public announcement. So all the things that you hope to do, we were able to do, and I give Rowan a lot of credit for stick handling that.
And with that, I know you've talked about how Jordi, told you that he wanted a kind of pro style environment for Canada basketball. Maybe talk, we've talked about it a bit in Jakarta when we were together, but just what Canada basketball has done for the players to make it almost a first class environment for them, and how much you guys, kind of took a big bet on them to be successful, to kind of reap the rewards.
Yeah, and we're doing that across our men's and women's portfolios because they're filled with pro athletes. We can't ask pro athletes to give us their time for free because that's really what it is. We are asking them based on their pride for the country and loyalty to the program to compete for Canada at a time when they can choose to do something else. And so, what were the tenets that we believed were part of that value exchange that we owed them? And here's what we heard time and time again from our men and our women: best coaching possible, so that when I leave this environment, I'm actually a better player than when I came in, when I go back to whatever club I'm going back to. So you see the investments we've made across all of our programs in coaching and retaining, top quality pros, mixture of FIBA and NBA or WNBA experience. We've done that. Better training camp environments. And by that means, where we train, how long we train, the resources and environments that we train in. So our women and men have certainly been able to do that through Canada. We've partnered with some great, whether it be the Raptors when we train in Toronto, City of Edmonton, or Victoria, first-class training facilities, first-class hotels, good meal programs, all of that. And then, the third one is really about competition prep and scrimmages. I'm not an athlete, but when I did play recreational, games are a lot more fun than practice, right? Like AI wasn't kidding when he was practice.
Yeah.
The athletes like to run in game scenarios, and leading into a competition, you have to spend some money and some time and some resources to make sure that you match up against top quality competition before you go into that competition. And that's not something that we've always been able to invest in. And now we are. For example, the women, just even before this summer in their AmeriCup, we hosted Japan for 3 games in Victoria, top quality competition. So, quite frankly, our team got their butts kicked twice. It was a very young roster. They were learning to play together, and then they go on a great run at AmeriCup because of the strong prep that they had against, and for the men, getting over to Germany, playing some games, getting over to Spain, playing some games. Might I add, 2 of those prep games had overtime scenarios, and we won both of those. And when we rolled into the game against USA, I don't want to say I was overconfident, but knowing that our team had played and won in overtime, I was confident for sure. So those outcomes happen because you prep right, you train right, and you're surrounded by the right coaches. So that's how we can invest back into the promise to the athletes by top quality pro level experience.
What type of kind of friendlies or stuff do you have? I'm not going to try to make you reveal state secrets, but just like what should people expect ahead for the Olympics, especially on the men's side where they know for sure, although I am very confident in the women, as you said, as well, making the Olympics, but just give us a little bit of an idea around that.
So we are kind of the belle of the ball right now. We're getting a lot of offers, which is great. What I am learning with a European-based Olympics, drawing teams to North America before they then go back to Europe, because you actually look at the number of teams that are pre-qualified on the men's side. A lot of them are European-based, and then you've got Australia and Japan. Pulling them to North America for friendlies is going to be tough. We're trying, but it's going to be tough. What I am confident in is we're going to have a good set of runs globally, probably based in Europe. We're trying to get something done in North America with another friend that happens to have qualified that resides in North America as well.
I think I know who you're alluding to, Mike.
We're trying to get that done. It would be wonderful. Whether or not that's Canadian soil or U.S. soil or both, I can't promise yet, but we're certainly talking about it. And then from what we're also trying to do is around our training camps, which would be domestic, both men's and women's, even if they're in different locations or at different times, open practices, red and white scrimmage games. We want Canada to experience
Awesome.
engagement with the team, and we want the team to experience engagement with the fans. So we're going to take, back in my old Raptors community programming days, the open practice that they used to run and still do. There's something there that's magic, I think, that we could unlock for this Olympic prep too.
And with that, with the men's team, I'm sure you've heard all the people talking about what 12 goes to Paris, and obviously there's a lot of time between now and then, and there's injuries and everything. But for me, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. But how is Canada basketball approaching the core 14, the guys that committed, and then maybe guys outside of that in terms of being on the roster, like an Andrew Wiggins and others? In terms of who gets to go to Paris? Is it exclusively core 14 as just give us a kind of what Canada basketball's thinking on that.
Yeah, and I think Rowan and Jordi have both spoken well to it. First of all, what I'll say is it's great to hear all athletes, Canadian athletes, talk about their interest in being a part of it next year, whether or not they're on that promoted core or list or not. Having the excitement of Canadian athletes to be a part of something that we're building, that's what you want. These are now nice problems to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, there is a lot of respect for and commitment to those that have answered the call through this window or through these windows and through this quad to make up our core. Each one of those men can fully count on being in training camp, and I think that's something that we can say with pride. I think there is some discussion around some at certain positions and certain players and whether or not they fit with an opportunity to compete. And I think in a lot of cases, some degrees, our core players are going to have a say in that.
Okay.
I think, I think back to what you try to do in establishing even this core strategy. It was about building a team.
Mm-hmm.
And teams have voices, and those voices are to be checked in with. And that's how you build a great organizational and winning culture. It's not a dictatorship. So I know Jordi's having conversations, Rowan's having conversations where, we want to know what the guys think and what their ambitions are. And I think you don't necessarily give the team the only say, but it's a say. And we need to have conversations. What we need to focus on right now is supporting all of our Canadian athletes through their season, celebrating them when they come through Toronto, on the Jumbotron as Canadians. And, as an organization for us, really concentrating on getting the women qualified, the 3x3 women qualified. There's still an outside shot that a men's 3x3 team could qualify too. So, we won't get too far down the rabbit hole of building the men's roster yet. What I can say is we're taking great pride in the fact that I think we've established a culture that everyone wants to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And only good things will happen from that over time.
What would a good Olympics for you, Mike, be in Canada basketball? How would you maybe define that?
You've heard me say it a few times probably, but like the opportunity to create a moment that Canadians will carry with them for a lifetime. I could rhyme off 6 or 7 in my lifetime, and half of them, if not more, are Olympic connected moments. Sid's goal, Donovan, even Ben Johnson. I remember sitting on the living room floor for that. And, there's some figure skating moments. I grew up in an Olympic household. Like we just like the Olympics were on for TV or on for 2 weeks, and like we just the household shut down. I even think I got to skip school from time to time, depending on the time zone. So Olympic moments become Canadian iconic moments, and I'd love for our program to create 1 or 2 of those over the course of Paris. The cool thing about the basketball calendar over the Olympics is that there's a chance we could, play. One of our teams could play almost every day.
Yeah.
It's a 2-week storyline, and I'd love to keep it going for the full 2 weeks. I'd love to get out of the medal or get out of the the round robin, all of our teams, and into the medal round, and give Canada a real chance to like rally around something. I think if we were in a different, like, listen, the television numbers for the World Cup were really strong considering the time zone. That Canada Spain game, even with the rebroadcast of the cumulative, did I think greater than 500,000
Wow. Wow.
reach. You put that thing at 8 p.m. primetime live. Uh,
Yeah.
that's we're on to something here, and I think basketball is connecting with this country, and I think the chance to celebrate basketball over a 2 week period in a friendlier time zone like Paris could create some real moments for the country. And I want to be the reason that Canada has moments. Like I want our program to
Yeah.
be that reason. So that's what I hope for. Does that mean a medal, a podium? Sure as heck hope so. Like I
Mhm.
think we're good enough. I do believe we're good enough. I'd love for that to be the case, but at the very least, like moments that rally this country that we create, that's the ultimate goal.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I'm gonna throw a tough question at you, but a fun question. And so be on your toes. Who do you take, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander or Steve Nash? Who is the better player for Canada?
My bias will show because obviously I'm heavily involved in the program now, and I'm predisposed to now. I just I I'm hard pressed. Never. I don't think I could ever not pick Shea in that question.
Yeah,
Uh, to
yeah.
see, like, man, the coolest thing I ever saw in live sports was he hits that 2 pointer to go up against Spain,
Yep.
and then he's just like, he's
Yep.
and just like everybody just calm down, like that, and that's who he is, man. Like it was fascinating to watch him prepare and be level and know when to turn on it. And it looks like he's moving in slow motion. His ability
Oh,
to stop his body. I don't think anyone has actually had that kind of body control before that I can recall. I watched a lot of basketball. I grew up like primarily a basketball fan. So like I've watched a lot of basketball even before I got into the business of it. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone who can move like that. It's fun to watch.
my colleague Jonathan Chen, when Shea hit that famous step back three around Miles was Mikal Bridges and Austin Reeves. I think those were the two.
Double break, the
Yeah, yeah,
double.
yeah. And you see his ankles and they're almost like curved in. And my colleague was like, I don't know how that's like, how does his ankles work that way? But he's an amazing player.
Like you catch him, of course, like we're in the training environment over that time, and like he's kneeling on a Bosu ball, kneeling on a Bosu. I can't even like I can't even sit on a Bosu ball with my feet on the floor. He's kneeling on it. It's stationary. He's pressing weight with one arm and pulling a band with another, and it's stationary. Like
Yeah.
that's how core control, all that stuff. But like he trains for that. He does everything on purpose for that, for those moments. There's no slight of Steve. I think this program and this sport in this country
Yeah.
is probably a decade and a half ahead of where it would have been without him, or even 2 decades without him. But yeah, I think if you're asking me going into this Olympics, Steve at his prime or Shea at his prime, I think today's game needs Shea at his prime for us to be winners.
For sure. And I just want to say, Mike, I'm so appreciative of all of the work you've done for Canada basketball. I really feel we're in good hands, and I'm really appreciate you, being gracious with your time because I know you're a very, very busy guy. I just want to give you the floor as the CEO. Is there anything else you want to, tell people about Canada basketball? Anything they can expect? Anything at all that you want to talk about?
Well, thank you. You're very kind. It's it's a lot of fun to have this responsibility and this job, and to lean into creating the momentum that we're hoping to create, and are creating. I think my challenge to the Canadian basketball fan is don't make this just about the men's team. We have,
Mhm.
I'll tell you straight up, our if you were to look at the betting odds of our best chance to win a medal, it's our 3x3 women's team.
Oh,
Back to back women's series champions 2 years in a row. When the four of them were on the court together in a tournament, they were undefeated this summer.
Wow.
So, we've got a lot of opportunity right now. And I think I just don't want Canada to sleep on all of the opportunity. The men's team will certainly get a lot of the titles and headlines and all that kind of stuff. And that's more of it's almost a shame on media in the way that they pay attention in that way. But ultimately, what we're about to do, it's a men's, women's 3x3. It's a multifaceted story.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to, watch the Olympics, hopefully with, all four teams, men's, women's 3x3, obviously the women's team as well, who should qualify, hopefully, fingers crossed. And I really appreciate your time. And thanks so much for doing this.